Unpacked. I'm Rich Pasqua, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Adam Martin, co-founder of Macroverse, a multi-format entertainment studio that rewards its community, collectors, creators, and collaborators for supporting up-and-coming blockbuster franchises spanning comics, TV, gaming, animation, and much, much more. Welcome, Adam. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Oh, me too. I'm excited to be here. You said it was like basically geeks talking about geek stuff. I was like, that's my life. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a Web3 spin, a
Oh,
technology spin,
definitely.
perhaps marketing and advertising. Who knows what we get into? But yes, we kind of keep it free form and flowing, and
Brilliant.
that's the way that we like it, conversational. So now, I mean, the optimal word in the intro to me was like comics, comics, comics. Obviously, TV. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. People get obsessed about these things,
Yep.
and it's interesting because I started many years ago and actually published one of the first online digital comic books for it was 2020. I'm sure someone beat me to it
Right.
at some point, but 2020, 2001, and it was for the movie Pitch Black.
Of course. Interesting. Yep.
Yes, so we designed the agency I was working with. We designed the website. We helped them with brand and design and visuals and animation. And we were working with Peter Tui, the producer on the show,
Yep.
and we were getting the dailies. Literally, we were putting everything together as they were putting the movie together.
Oh
And we're
wow.
like, you know what? This would be dynamite as a comic book, and we did. It was called Slam City because
Right.
Slam City was that giant floating penitentiary that they had.
Oh right. Of course. Yes. 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 It's been such a long time since I've seen Pitch Black, but I remember loving it when I was like, wait, Vin Diesel. Who the hell is this guy? He's going to be a star, right? It was like it was crazy.
That's exactly what we all said. We're like, we don't know who the heck this guy is, but man, he's like every man kind of
Yeah.
character,
Yeah.
and really interesting, and good looking, hunky guy, and sure enough, huge success. So
Oh yeah.
really interesting, and I'm slightly biased towards the comic book stuff, and so a lot of my friends, they're even more of a geeks than I am. But I'd love to ask you, Adam, how did you? It looks like you've got a pretty rich history in the entertainment world, in the entertainment game, for some time now. How did you get involved in it? What was your jumping off point?
Kind of jumping off point. I honestly, it was a combination of kind of luck and I think as so often the kind of family to some degree. So I was very lucky. My mum was a film critic growing up, and so we were always watching. She had this deal where, especially as a teenager, she was like, "All right, we'll go and see Star Wars or whatever you want to see, but then we're going to go and watch like something classic." So, I don't know, I saw my first Ingmar Bergman at the age of 8 or something, which was way too young, but that was but so that was always the trade-off. So I think I had this kind of ingrained idea of like I love movies and I love talking about movies, and I would discuss them with my parents and all these things. And then I have older brothers by quite a jump, and one of them, I was kind of in university. I did physics and philosophy at university with an eye. I'd worked in a refugee camp for a while. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the aid world. And my brother was at USC, had come out of USC and was like starting to direct and write. And he said, look, you don't seem to know what you want to do, especially why don't you come stay with me for a summer? I'll see if we can hook you up as a PA on a movie and then see if you like it because it's kind of fun. I moved to LA, ended up as a director's assistant on this terrible little movie called Runaway Car. It was a movie of the week when those things existed. It was like Speed and a Dachshund, right? Like it was ridiculous. But I was director's assistant at a time when you could kind of do everything, and it was this little low budget, non-union low budget thing. And I just totally fell in love with this. I had Drax Scholder was the director. He had done like The Hidden and Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and like good track record of great horror movies in the 80s, I guess. And I just fell in love. And the first AD, the first assistant director on that movie was John Frankenheimer's first assistant. And he said, look, we hit it off. And he said, look, if you can kind of figure out how to come back here, I'm starting up this movie, George Wallace, in the spring. You come PA. And so I figured it out. Like, we wrangled something, came back, and I met my wife on that movie. She was John's assistant and had a small role in it. And we got married we hooked up at a rap party, got married 3 months later, and that was it. That was 26 years ago and stayed. And then just, yeah, PA'd for a bunch of years, worked my way up through the ranks to kind of assistant director through the GGA. So now I've been, first ADing for a long time, lots of a ton of great shows, and led me back around into kind of, the more creative side of things at the same time. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's no straight path to this
None,
stuff.
right?
And, a lot of my buddies and coworkers, were like, "How did you get involved with Nickelodeon and all these like Mattel?" I worked with. How did you do that? I said, "Well, it's a little bit of like an accident meets I don't know."
Yes. I think it was also, honestly, I suspect you have that same thing that certainly we do, that I feel has served me and my business partner, Amber Matthews, incredibly well, which is like, when you get an opportunity, we're like, yes. I was like, oh, wait, yeah, no, of course we can do that thing. We do that all the time. And then we kind of leave the meeting and be like, okay, how do we do this? What do we do? We can figure out how to do it. So say yes and then figure it out. And that, I think, has that kind of jump before looking attitude has occasionally got us in trouble. But most of the time it's got us kind of the next step and where we should be going,
Yeah, and I think that's well said, Adam, because it was a little bit of a jump. I had the skill sets to do all of the the direct creative and art direction and all that stuff, but there was I helped create hundreds of games for all these shows.
Wow.
And so by default I became a game guy at
Right.
some point.
Right.
Less on the development side and more on the storytelling and creative side, and gameplay side, leveling and all that stuff. But yeah, it's fascinating how you can kind of just get lost in that world. And I have friends that are still there. Half of my
Yeah.
staff I hired are still there.
Still in gaming? Yeah.
They're in Nickelodeon, the MTV networks, or maybe they moved around from different channels or whatnot.
Yeah.
But certainly Nickelodeon was the top gun, and Nick Jr. and all that good stuff too.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a ton of great stuff. I mean, Nickelodeon is still producing some great content. I feel like they've been, the Cartoon Network kind of gets the lion's share of the attention now. But Nickelodeon was such a kind of pioneer in its own way. It's interesting.
Yeah, they'll have another like renaissance, if you
Yes.
will, and I think they should bring back some old shows.
Yeah.
Pete and Pete, and there's such a wacky live action stuff they did. Yeah, beautiful thing. And since we're on the topic of characters and storytelling and whatnot, I mean, I don't ask this of anyone, but I will ask you, Adam, what was maybe a character, a comic book, a movie, anything? What was that maybe when you were younger? What was that character that pulled you into this world? Because if you're a comic person, or anything else, you're kind of like, it started when you were younger. When did
Yes.
this bud off?
I mean, look, I can trace it back. I was 4, I believe, when the first Star Wars came out. So it's one of my early memories is my mum taking me to see Star Wars. And I remember being in awe and completely terrified by the monster in the trash compactor. Like, that gave me nightmares. But so Star Wars, and I remember so clearly then seeing, obviously a few years later, like seeing Empire, and then going and queuing up at the Odeon in Leicester Square to see Return of the Jedi, and so I think there was kind of a formative thing there. But in terms of the comics especially, I became obsessed with 2000 AD, which is obviously very much a kind of English comic, not I think nearly as well known in the States. I became obsessed by that when I was at boarding school at the age of 9 or 10 in England, and we had a certain amount of pocket money, and that we were allowed to walk down into town to the one comic shop to get our like 2000 AD for 25 pence or whatever it was, and Judge Dredd in that I remember so clearly loving. But then also I think it was, if you remember, I don't know if you know 2000 AD, but if Strontium Dog was this huge one, Johnny Alpha and Strontium Dog, and he was this like outsider struggling on his own, like everything that I kind of felt as this slightly kind of weird geeky kid at boarding school with my parents 5,000 miles away around the world. And I really identified with that. And I think that love of comics came from 2000 AD 100%, and then that took, kept going through high school, waned a bit in university, and then in LA, and coming back into that world 10 years ago, having kind of established in entertainment. Yeah, yeah. That's the joy, and especially with kids. And I think having, I learned to read. I mean, sorry, going back any further, I learned to read on Asterix, and then watching my son kind of doing the same thing. Like the first book he really loved and got his teeth into was some of these old Asterix omnibuses, and that was great to see that kind of that love. And now he is, he developed a love of the kind of Marvel comics, and then actually now he's 60, almost 60 now, is heavily into manga, and has a Kindle and reads manga obsessively, and it's has introduced me to anime over the last couple of years. And I think I'd always slightly dismissed anime, and my God, there's some incredible storytelling in that world. It's incredible.
I love the old school stuff, from the early 90s and whatnot. What was it, Blue Submarine? Or was it Submarine Number 9 or something like that? It was
I don't know that.
Unbelievable hybrid traditional cell animation mixed with 3D, and it was just had a lot of. It was very lush, and the storytelling was great and
Yes.
whatnot.
No,
But yeah, it's interesting how your taste evolves, and I think, if I was to ask myself a similar question, it's interesting to hear you say about Star Wars, because those are some of my earliest kind of entertainment memories. The ship, the trash compactor, the whole bit. It was just so inventive and well done. Um, but when it comes to comics, I was always into Spider-Man, like the regular Spider-Man, Marvel-y, Fantastic Four, all that stuff. Then I really still I'm kind of still a sucker for Silver Surfer. Just love that story. No one has told it properly yet. This is my one gripe for the podcast. Please do
Well,
it right.
yes, there have been a couple of terrible movies of those. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And then, as I progressed and got older, the subject matters tend to go a little darker, maybe a little bit more magical, and got into the Sandman collection, Dave McKean, and that blew my
Sandman is
mind.
just sublime storytelling. I mean, it's so good, and I think I mean, I love Neil Gaiman. I think he's got a few books that I love. I mean, if you read the Graveyard Book, if you read that of his, it's the Jungle Book. So it's the story of Mowgli, but told with this boy being raised by ghosts in a graveyard. Just incredible. I mean, just phenomenal. And then, I mean, Nevermore,
Yeah.
Nevermore, Neverwhere, and Good Omens. I mean, I love Terry Pratchett. Always kind of grew up with Terry Pratchett, and so that book I love particularly.
Yeah, I got to see him speak at, I don't know if it wasn't Comic Con. It was South by Southwest once, and that was really cool. Just like, oh my gosh, like childhood hero.
It's
That,
fun when
that
you get to meet those people, right? Or you get to do that occasionally. Yeah, you get to do those things that are really special.
yeah, and being that we're talking about this, it's not easy because we talk to a lot, even though in the Web3 space, we talk to a lot of entertainment type of companies or gaming companies that are tethering different platforms together, like Mana Games. We talk to often, and they're wrapping leaderboards and reward systems into a whole Web3 tokenized world. But at the end of the day, when you talk, we also talk to the heads of Solana, and they're doing some really fun Solana spaces. Their whole NFT collections are hinged around discovering and or supporting artists that are trying to make their way. And you and I know that it's extremely difficult. Like it's difficult to illustrate, it's difficult to write, it's difficult to produce something, right? And then get it out there. And there is a huge support system, almost like the music industry, right? And ironically, I can see where you guys are going is very similar, but very different in a lot of ways to what the new Napster is doing, right? So we spoke to Jonathan Vizopoulos, the new CEO of Napster, and they're opening up, and it's really going to be less about, hey, we're an A&R company,
Right.
we're this big machine, and we're going to help support you, and we're going to throw marketing dollars at you that we expect back, by the way.
Right. Of course. Yep.
And they're letting the community support each other and create economies around individual or groups of artists. And I think that's fantastic. And I think that's kind of where you're going. And maybe you can open up the macroverse doors for us and, give us a little bit more about what you're doing over there.
Yeah, no, and I think it is. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it is the joy of this Web3 space. I think is the opportunities that are kind of unique to it for artists. And you certainly touch upon as well this, the kind of gumption that it takes to get any artistic endeavor out in the world. Like, it's just it takes some courage, it takes skill, it takes all these things to get out there. And then I think what we did see a few years ago, well, again, the kind of boom in 2001 certainly was a ton of projects who, they're a PFP project, or there's something like they've got a great thing, they get a huge raise, they're doing really well. And then I would hear continually some iteration from the founders of, we've got all this stuff, and of course we're going to make a comic book and a movie and a game and a TV series, but what we're really focused on is this. And I'd always be like, hang on a second, you've just described 5 years of work in kind of a flippant sentence. You know what I mean? Like, I've spent decades in production. Like, I know what it takes to make a TV show. We've done a ton of animation. We've produced a bunch of, like, that is lots of effort from highly skilled people trying to create these things. And I think... And so that was part of the reason why we focused in on Web3, having started as a straight Web2 app. So, like, I know out in the world, we've got it up on our iOS and Android right now. And we really started it for ourselves initially, having kind of, my partner Evan and I, having kind of written a couple of screenplays and got them optioned and, kind of done the tours of the various things, and realizing, wait, even if we sell something, it's going to end up on a shelf. 99 times out of 100, it's going to end up a file on someone's computer. But if we go into comics and we can put a bit of our effort into that, well, at least then what we create will be out in the world. And so we're looking at the industry. We had produced a comic series called for the Boondock Saints movies 10, 12 years ago now. And that led us back into comics. Like, this is great. We love this process. We love kind of reignited our love of comics. And this traditional side of things is very, very broken. Like, we had a known IP, we had some celebrity attached to it, and we were still kind of beating our heads against the wall to some degree. It's like, oh dear God, if we didn't have those things, what would we be doing? We looked around, we felt like, yeah, the future is digital. Everything is going that way. This was 10 years ago. And so, but we don't like any of the kind of applications for comics in digital at the moment. Like, it tends to be, it's either a PDF and an iPad, or Webtoons was kind of blowing up. It's like perpetual scroll. So at least that is native to the mobile device, but we still didn't feel like it gave us enough. And so we developed this tap story technique where it's literally like, great, I tap on one side of the screen and the story moves forward, and I tap on the other side and it goes backwards. It introduces the element of time to storytelling. It introduces the ability to do real dialogue in a way that is, you're not restrained by you're not constrained rather by the physical space on a page. And then, so we kind of did that for ourselves, kind of as an experiment. We're like, yeah, this works. Well, if we like this, it's going to work for, presumably other people will like this as well. And so we just started approaching other independent comics artists that we liked. We're like, all right, there's Marvel and DC are going to go do their thing. Webtoons is kind of YouTube in this perpetual scroll. Like, what's the HBO version of this? How can we find, what can we do? What are the interesting projects? Looking for an audience that we can monetize in a way that doesn't work on Webtoons, that isn't just the PDF and the iPad through Comixology, and then you're still trying to break through the noise of those environments. And so, yeah, we basically, like, started reaching out. We obviously had connections in the comic industry, so we started reaching out for projects that existed, and then also interesting writers who had ideas that we could then pair with artists that we could bring and create stuff for this format. And then as the Web3 kind of world hit, we felt like, oh wait, digital collectability in this kind of online world, well, those things just work. So now we can introduce this collectible element to the digital stuff that we're producing and then package those things with a view to ultimately coming out and producing physical books as well, not excluding the physical, but just kind of layering this thing. So you want to, you want to read something on mobile? Great, we've got that. If you want to kind of collect it digitally and you're into that world, great, we've got that. And then obviously with, producing as well, producing physical books as well. And what all those things then led us back around to, which has been really, really fun, has been, I think, the thing that excites us the most is this kind of community storytelling idea that comes from these PFP collections. Like, great, I bought this thing, I bought this Bushido or this. We're working with this team called the Wanderers. We're the Wanderers project right now. It's a great sellout. They've got a huge, large fan base, doing really well, doing some really cool stuff in the gaming sphere as well. Bunch of people with these cool characters, not really sure kind of what else to do with them. And what we ended up doing is like, great, let us come in. We can teach basic storytelling within your communities. There are going to be people who are excited about telling stories about these characters. And then we will teach storytelling and then have people pitch stories around their characters that then the community votes on, and the top 10 of those we're going to green light into these little 2-page comics. And so this community gets to see this thing that I've got, that I love, that I identify with. Now I get this story, and most of them are amateur storytellers. This is the first time they've really written anything. But it's so exciting and it's so new, and there's interesting ideas, and you get these things come up. They're like, wait, I would never have thought to do that, but now here's this, and this maybe I love that. And then we put them with great comics artists, and we're in the process of producing around. We're literally in the producing kind of artists are in production on a bunch of these shorts for Wanderers right now. We've done that with Bushidos. We've done that with a project called the GSA. We've done that with our own series, a show called Dead Town, a series called Dead Town. And that excitement around from people who have kind of aspired to be storytellers but never quite known, who never quite had the parameters within which to tell the stories. Suddenly you get these outlets in this Web3 way, and it's incredibly exciting. Sorry, that was a very long answer to a simple question, but it's something I get really enthused about,
It's all good, and like we were saying before, there is no straight line with all these stories. They split off, they come back together.
Yes.
And I think it's really interesting because when I was at Nickelodeon, we would always say, okay, we'd have the pitch and the catch, right? So
Yes.
TV would pitch to online would pitch back to TV, and it was all in support of storytelling and character development.
Super smart. Yes.
Right? And extension, so edutainment, we used to call it, because there was always an education spin, even if it was just light, on all the games with the characters, right?
Right.
But we were extending the time a child or a teenager had with the characters in much more depth, right?
Yes.
So
that's so interesting, because I think that's it's something we try and think about all the time. It's not this idea of multimedia. It's this kind of multi-format experiencing that I think kids and fans in general really want. It's like, all right, my partner has a now 10-year-old daughter, right? But we would watch her from the age of like 6, 5. And if she was in a kind of Blue's Clues kind of day, it was like, great, I'm going to watch the Blue's Clues, I'm going to watch this thing on YouTube, I'm going to go play this game over here, I'm wearing a t-shirt, I've got a hat, I've got these toys that I'm going to... And like, her world became this thing. So it was just about interacting with this thing that she loved, totally agnostic of what am I doing, what's the platform, where am I... didn't give a crap about any of that stuff. It was just, I'm playing with this thing. And I kind of remember, I mean, obviously, back in the day for us with Star Wars, I was obsessed with the little Star Wars figures. And I would recreate things. And of course, we didn't have any other outlets to plug into. But dear God, if I was 8 years old and if I had the opportunity to go and watch Star Wars and play a Star Wars game and do it, I would probably thank God I didn't, because I wouldn't have got anything else done, frankly. But I think that's the very much the power of what you're talking about. Is that you love this thing. Well, great. How do you create as many ways that fans can enjoy that thing as possible?
Yeah. Well said. And it is about making that connection. And ironically, you brought up your partner's daughter, and perhaps your kids or other friends, family, and kids and whatnot. I've often, it was funny when I moved from Brooklyn back to Long Island. All the kids in the neighborhood were like, I think he works for Nickelodeon, and you were like a rock star. You were some kind of rock star. But I'll meet people who are in their 20s, 30s, and they'll be like, "You worked on Blue's Clues?" I'm like, "Yeah, I worked with the show creators. I worked on Wow Wow Wubsy. I've got writers' credits for that. We came up with an episode through a game. We took a game and made it into an episode.
That's awesome.
We worked in reverse, and you'll hear these young adults going, "I used to play your games all the time, nonstop," and that was when it was like there weren't so many. I mean, there were consoles, of course, but people were geeking out online. We were doing isometric games and 3D rendered snowboarding games with Dora the Explorer, and people come back, and it just to prove the point that you're saying here is this stuff works. As far as formulating good memories, the shows are one thing, you never forget them, but they remember the games, and I'm always blown away. So it's about making that connection.
It's going to be so interesting with this generation now coming up, where there's so much more. I kind of hate the word content, but I feel like that's the only applicable thing. That's like, there's, certainly for me growing up in England, like there were 3 channels on television, and we went to the movies once every couple of months. Like that was it, and so, whereas now it's like, oh, there's a new great something coming every fucking week. Like this is, and part of me is incredibly jealous of that, because I feel like this is just the joy of having that richness of an experience. At the same time, I think no one thing is as important in that way to some degree, or it takes a lot more for something to break through to be that kind of Star Wars thing, or that's whatever that might be.
Yeah, and you're heading into a little bit of territory that I was going to bubble up later, but it's really appropriate for now. Where do you think the roadblocks are? Where do you think the challenge is? Hollywood, I don't even want to say Hollywood, entertainment in general has. What do you think?
Roadblocks, I think so. It's a great question. I think it's a very multi-layered answer, right? So I think there's entertainment in general, Hollywood in particular, I will say, but I think entertainment in general, it's stuck. The executives, a lot of the decision makers on the way up the ladder are stuck between 2 polarizing opposites, right? There is the fear of saying yes to something that flops, and the fear of saying no to something that's a runaway success somewhere else, right? And if you've done either of those things, you're in trouble somewhere. And if that happens a couple of times, so it's like the Fox network, the Fox exec that said George Lucas could keep the merchandising rights, right? Oh, well, yeah, it was a short-term decision to save them a couple $1 million, cost them billions in the long run. You see that again and again. And I think there is such a challenge when you're trying to navigate that as a creator, coming up with something new that may be brilliant but looks a little too risky. You look back, I mean, The Matrix was such a groundbreaking film, changed filmmaking in certain ways, certainly expanded, did so many good things for the entertainment industry, for film industry, I should say. that would not get made today. No one is greenlighting a new idea at $150 million unless you're Chris Nolan, frankly. He can probably get away with doing that. The Wachowskis, they'd done Bound before that, and like one other, like who the fuck are these guys? And they've got this crazy idea, and now, you know, like that would not happen in this world. And I think that's really sad in a way. Because I think it constrains creators in a certain way. So I think that's one. And then I think on the other side is there's obviously opportunities for outlets are infinitely expansive. But so then it becomes about how do I break through the noise of the billion hours of content on YouTube or on TikTok or on whatever, or the thousands of online comics that exist. How do I get mine noticed? And I think that comes back to something you mentioned earlier, which is the marketing side of it and breaking through the noise. It's breaking through the static, becoming signal rather than static. Is another huge challenge.
Yeah, I think you hit on two very important topics. One is taking risks. Really,
Yes.
people are not doing that. And to your point about the Wachowski brothers and the Matrix and all that stuff, that
Now,
was
I guess
like
the Wachowskis, but yes.
Yeah, exactly right.
Maybe
So
I'm all good.
yeah, so very risky, a very alternative kind of storyline, which ironically is like in a weird way coming true.
Yes, it's completely right. It's very, very got that kind of Ender's Game vibe to it somehow. Yeah.
Ender's Game, another favorite. I love that book. The movie
So
was
good.
fantastic. Doesn't mean I want it to come true.
Oh,
But the second thing was, even if you're that risk taker, you have to change that boardroom. You have to change the marketing, the CMO or the CEO's mind on a specific character that could perhaps take you into darker waters, or not, or could be a smash hit, or it could fall on his face. But then there's the second thing, and I often think how many great cartoonists or cartoon creators or writers are out there that are just not seen because there's a deluge of noise and static throughout the whole world. And, yes, the internet has something to do with it, but it's just overwhelming nothingness and very little gems, and my kids often, and I have to bring this up because, the question was asked. My kids are more critical of movies that you spend, $12, $15, $20 a ticket for, as we are as adults. So we just don't go out to see everything under the sun. But if something is part of a franchise or a character set or something that we like, we'll go definitely do it. But they are noticing that, why is the storytelling so poor? And both my daughter and my son actually read, they read more than they do watch, ironically, which is kind of an anomaly. But they get into the fantasy books. They get into, Tolkien. They get into all of these, I would say, the roots of it all.
yeah.
Right? So there's some interesting upsides to this, but I think the whole media landscape is changing and the way things are done. The advent, and we can get into this a little bit later, Adam, the advent of AI, right? And how that's helping people from storyboard artists to commercial filmmakers, do their job or tell their stories.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen, and I think it's more of a mental shift. I think you have to not be dinged for being creative. Don't ding someone for that.
I think that's another reason why we were kind of attracted to the comic space, aside from being fans, but it was also this thing of, I think the comics are a space where you can still take risks. And yes, there's some, unless you are an artist, there is some financial outlay, obviously, like you've got to be paying someone to do something in there. But that you can, the array of stories being told, and interesting ones, and humorous or dark or twisted or whatever it is, there is an outlet in this medium in a way that I think is incredibly hard, either in live action anywhere or in animation, just because the expense and the barrier to entry there is so much greater. And so I think that is something that attracts us to the comics as a medium. Is you can still experiment, and you can do it, especially in these short forms. Like, we're doing an increasing amount of short form kind of content. Forgive me, there is a massive thunderstorm breaking outside, so you get the occasional flashes. There's quite spectacular lightning happening out there. I think you get to iterate quickly with comics, and in a kind of Web3 especially, if you've got a fan base and you've got an audience, and you can, like, great, test this idea. Is this landing? Yes, great. Let me put a bit more kind of money and time and effort into this. Great. Now, is that landing? Yes. All right, well, these ones don't land. I think iterate is the only way to say it. I think you can, test ideas and run through things kind of quickly. And that's exciting from an audience perspective, and hopefully then paves the way. I'm sure you've encountered this 100 times as well. It's the kind of, you get stuck again in that kind of fear that the rival fears for the execs. If you could at least go into someone saying, look, this thing had X million views and they've got this amount of attention, it's got these, so they at least know, well, I can take this to my boss with the knowledge that someone else liked this too. It's not just my recommendation.
Yeah,
you get to mitigate that a little bit.
That's a really, really good point, because years ago, I want to start a record, or I want to create a record. I'm a musician, or a comic book, or write a book for that matter.
Yes.
And you'd have to get an advance, and you'd have to literally pay it back through your earnings, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And now people can, we're talking to so many different, like, illustrators, artists, and a handful of them are like very Japanime style.
Nice.
And what they do is they'll drip out little sketches to their community.
Yep.
Right? And the community will be like, you know what? Overwhelmingly, this is like, we love this one. This one's so good. It's like, great. I was thinking of starting a more elaborate or an in-depth storyline with that particular character.
Right.
And they could use the fans, not use them, but incorporate the fans into their world.
That's the thing. I think it is. I think so. That is where has been the plus side of. There are many negatives to social media, obviously. I think one of the positive has been that interaction, like you say, this kind of community. What's Jerry? You like what I do? How do I include my fan base in that process? And that's really special. And I think I think we think about it in terms of this kind of participation spectrum, right? So there are the people who they just want their Netflix, they want to read what they want to read, they want to watch what they want to watch. They've got great. Happy enough just to do that. And then I think that moves through the kind of people that want to be engaged, and they will really developing a connection to these characters and what they're doing, and this story, this franchise, this thing, this creator, whatever that is. There's real level of fandom. And then on the other end, I think, is the kind of ownership and engagement and creativity for themselves. And I think people tend to the majority fall in I just want to watch and read and do whatever. But I think we exist on that sliding scale. And so what I think Web3 does in a very, not in a unique way, but I think it enhances that, is the ownership and the true participation and engagement of fans with the creative process, playing within a world in unique ways. It's great.
Yeah, and it is, if you have a fan base, especially within this world, movies and comics and TV shows and gaming, people become fanatical, and they're like 2 steps away from the creator, or the illustrator, or the animator. That's wildly, especially for younger folks who may not even know. They know they love comics, right, but maybe they're inspired to be a sound engineer, or to be an illustrator, or something, to get involved. And then some guy, 10 states over, asks you to help him on his project, or her. And that's amazing. And then ultimately the Web3, and I want to unpack this a little bit more with you, is not just the connection, but there is a real wonderful set of economics, trusted economics through Web3 you could put in place. So hey, I need a lighting guy and a videographer. Can you help me out? Well, yeah. And by the way, this NFT that you're getting a special one because you helped out, and you're taking a slice of IP and or profit sharing. How
Yes.
are you guys doing stuff like that? I mean, I know your NFTs can get crazy and bloated and weird. And how are you doing it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, yes. Yes to everything you just said. I think, obviously, what we're seeing, I think, is the kind of bubble bursting to some degree in the NFT market. I think, obviously, there's been a ton of projects collapsing, and I think it's not a bad thing. I think that kind of hype cycle breaking is not bad, because I think the underlying tech and underlying tech. I think that's the important thing about this, because it allows, yes, this kind of integrated fan base. It allows this special things for fans of musicians. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of like Avenged Sevenfold and what they've done with their Death Bats Club and things like and Ticketmaster incorporating that into the sales process for their latest tour, which allows the fans to get the best ticket, the true fans, the dedicated fans, doesn't really, and I think that stuff is really interesting. And then, yes, in terms of the participation and the kind of long tail of ownership that comes with these, part of what we're doing with the kind of PFP collections that we're doing, that we're producing comics from, and is great. Yeah, you've got your character and you've pitched your thing, and we've produced this little 2-pager, and it's great, and everyone's happy with it. Well, what if that character goes on to become Boba Fett? Well, you own a piece of that. You've got this baked in. It's in, we're obviously always very diligent about avoiding the kind of securities angle of these things. Like, it's not baked into the smart contract, because profit participation of that just opens all sorts of, gets very tricky. But how we're doing it is a straight licensing agreement. It's like, great, you own X character, you've pitched this story, we're now making a comic on that thing. Well, great, we're licensing that comic back from you, and in that license agreement, we're saying we're going to pay you a percentage of royalties of this thing in perpetuity. So, again, 99 times out of 100 is going to be fun. It's going to be this thing. There's not really any money involved in it, but hey, you the owner, get this cool thing. Win-win so far. But let's say that thing becomes Boba Fett. Suddenly, there's real money attached to that, and because you own this original thing, and because we have that license agreement, you get to benefit from that, and that's hugely exciting as well. And we get to do it at a smart, at least initially. Obviously, it gets off chain, it gets complex, but at least initially, we get to do it at a smart contract level where there's no Hollywood accounting, there's no hiding of funds, there's none of the crap that we see going on in terms of the advances and the this and the blah, blah, blah. It's just like, no, great, money comes in, gets split up, appears in your wallet, and there we go. That's exciting, and I think the elimination of the potential, as much as there has been this obviously explosion of scams in the crypto and NFT space, I think actually the tech can lead to the elimination of actually kind of corporate level finagling and malfeasance to some degree, which is exciting.
Yeah, and it's there's tons of scammy rug pulls and whatnot,
Of course,
all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But
Look at fucking Wells Fargo. I mean, it's not it's not unique to this industry. It's just was made very easy with an explosion of tech. But yes, sorry, I cut you off. I didn't.
No, it's all good, and these are all topics that we cover anyways. But because there's so many of them.
Oh my God, yes.
But as these, whether it's Terra Luna or FTX or any one of these big, Ponzi's or whatever you want to call them, scams, they weren't crypto. Number one, I always have to reiterate that for my audiences. Those were not crypto experiences. Those were just, Ponzi schemes built on top of a casino.
Yep.
And that is it, just to be 100%.
100%. Yep.
But to your point, these things are important and sometimes painful lessons to learn for some people.
Yes.
If it smells rotten, stay away. If you don't see the founder's face on the website, you might not want to. You might not want to deal with them.
Yeah.
If you don't know where their VC's coming from, yeah, think about it. It's like everything else. But with this new, and I call it, creator community economy,
Yeah.
I'm already seeing it on the development side, meaning all these Solidity and Rust developers, they don't want to be paid in fiat. They don't want yen. They don't.
Right.
They want Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever it is, and
Yep.
they transact and do what they need to do by themselves, full custodial control over
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
But there is a groundswell of developers like yourselves and many others that have a staff ecosystem, a staffing ecosystem that works on bug bounties, reward systems. People love it. It's gamified work,
Yes.
right? So I think we're not even seeing it just yet. That's why I like ideas like Macroverse, where it's putting a little bit of equity back into the fans' hands. It's putting a lot more control in the creators' hands. And then all of a
100%.
sudden you're going to see, you guys will probably at some point have to build an entire platform just to help people manage their projects, perhaps.
Yes, yes, it's very much where we're heading. Like, I mean, I think that having started with the app, and the app too is something we very consciously, I think partly, and I'm sure you find this as well. It's like as creators ourselves, we've been across the table for some really shitty deals, and it's like every now and then you feel you have to take them because that's just what's on offer. But it's like, and so part of the way we approach dealing with the creators that we work with is, would we be happy taking this deal? And if the answer is yes, well then that's something we'll kind of pursue. We try and be very creator friendly. So for the app revenue as well, because it's a subscription based app, what we do is basically split the revenue in half. Half goes into creator pool, half comes to the company, and then the creator pool gets divided up amongst all the creators in the app based on readership. So that again, you're directly incentivized. Like, great, your project is accounts for 50% of the views this month. Well, great, 50% of the revenue pool for that month goes to you. And then obviously it swings and roundabouts and it fluctuates and different. But that way we are constantly looking to reward the creators directly for working with us and incentivizing their fans to reward them in these ways and then enjoy and expand and expand their own their experiences too. So hopefully you come onto our platform because you like Richard's stuff. Well, great. While you're on there, you also check out Adam's stuff and Evan's stuff and Ricky's stuff. And hey, this is kind of cool too. So then you as the fan get an extra, you get an extra kind of exciting and extra, you discover something else that you love. You, the person that brought them in, benefits, but then so does everybody else, and that hopefully that kind of rising tide floats all boats.
Yeah. I think it's great, and I think it's so polarizing to see how normal business is done, and it's done, or I shouldn't say business in general, but brands, the way brands, because I come from a branding background as well.
Of course. Yeah.
And the holy grail for a brand is to have your fans love you.
Yes.
The icing to that is getting your fans involved. Now it's just like we were talking about taking risks on a movie like The Matrix.
Right.
You have to take risks with your brands. You
Of
have to
course.
let your audience have a little bit of control and equity into it, even if it's just mental equity
Yes.
or just crowd support. You need to let them do that.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen is when you let your brand go a little bit, people will embrace it, and artists will take it, break it, and reinvent it.
Yes.
For good, for better, or worse.
Yes.
But you have to play in that world. And what Web3 does, especially for me, and the reason why I'm in this is because of cryptography. The idea of an algorithm helping two people or two parties trust each other.
Yes.
Humans can't do that.
Right.
Animals could do that better than humans. So the idea is that we have a trustless environment. What do you do with that? That's wildly powerful and exciting. And I
Yes.
think we're just scratching the surface, and I like to see platforms like Macroverse really start to think about these things. And certainly we could talk about DAOs, maybe on another podcast, but
Yes, 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 yes. Well, that's we feel like that may be in the roadmap.
I just eked it out there. I kind of figured you guys might be working on something like that.
Yeah.
It goes part and parcel with your whole audience, your whole
Yeah.
demographic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it is, there is, I think what's also going to be good, we're a little way away from that, obviously. And I think it's great because we've seen what's worked with other DAOs, what maybe hasn't worked as well. How do we navigate those waters? But it's all good experimentation. It's all interesting and it's all positive at this point. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, just jumping back into Macroverse world here and kind of
Yeah.
the mechanics of it a little bit. So everything that comes through your door, basically, I wouldn't say maybe they're collections or one-off pieces of art, but everything is kind of wrapped in an NFT, correct?
So we've got two different things. So we still have the kind of the Web 2 app as its own thing. So there's a ton of stuff coming in there. That's we've got a bunch of creators we're working with. We've got a lot more content that we're starting to kind of get out there into the world now. And that's simply you come in, you pay Apple your $5 a month. That's just super simple, straight Web 2. And then yes, in terms of the projects that we are working with directly, all Web3 based. We've developed what we think of as this kind of new way of enjoying comics through Web3 and through NFTs, and really packaging. What we've done is developed a way of packaging a comic and putting it inside the NFT, so that you have this. You can go on OpenSea and you can open this tile. We call it this kind of epic tile. Open this thing and you look and you can see. Here's the collection I've got. Here's an example of some of the things. Here's the art that's associated with it. Here's any additional pieces that we've put in there. All the collections that we're launching with in this way, very much this kind of NFT specific version of things, is different rarity tiers. You get different covers based on whether you've got kind of, copper, bronze, gold, silver, whatever. Different up, starting with a kind of, generally available base level all the way up to kind of one-of-one art from known crypto artists, as a way of just getting people excited and giving people something interesting. You can, on OpenSea, you can tease the series itself, so you can open it up and you can see a few things right there in the tile. And then you bring that back to our website, connect your wallet, and then that opens up, again, our kind of web viewer version of the Tap Story experience that we developed for mobile. So you get this beautiful wide screen, rich reading experience of whatever series that you've bought as a digital collectible.
I like the idea of those epics or the tiles.
Yes.
You flip it over and you got here's the frequency we recorded the audio at. Like that, I did that with some of my stuff where it was just a quick animation it was more about the audio, and so you geek out about it, the specs on it and what was it created on. It was created on a Moog modular synth, and then now there's something interesting there. And I asked that question because people are like, well, I got this, Bored Apes thing, NFT in my wallet, and you could check it out certainly on your phone. But to your point, really, it's about, that's just my key. That's just my ownership. That's that's a lot of metadata in there that geeky people at a party would want to know.
Yes.
But when you're home and you're enjoying this medium that you have, now you're in a more immersive desktop environment, and dare I say, maybe it goes to AR and VR down the road, right?
Well, exactly. And I think wow.
That's good.
It's getting good outside. It's exciting. It's the joy of being down in Panama is you get these storms occasionally, and they're quite impressive. I think exactly. The immersive AR for sure, and I think that's where the experiences that digital ownership give you in that environment, I think the doors that could get opened there are just huge. And the experiences that fans, everyday users can have is kind of boundless. And then I think the other thing that's fun, you talk about the kind of the metadata aspect of it all. It's like, yeah, so in the metadata of the thing that you bought, the comic series that you own, well, what if we want to, we've got some cool behind the scenes, we've got some of the sketches that we want to do. Well, great, we can just upload that straight into your NFT. So it can become this enhanced thing. We can just, you own this one, well, great, everyone that owns this, we're just going to give this other series to because you enjoy this thing. We're going to, the ways of enhancing those experiences that are unique to Web3 just get really cool. And I think, again, it's about, for creators, it's about how do you extend that connection with your fans and the people who love your work. That becomes limitless and different to, I'm just going to put this other sketch up on Instagram to see if people like it. It's like, no, I'm going to give you this other thing, and there's only 500 of these that exist, and now because you're a super fan of mine, you get this extra cool thing. And the value of it is kind of neither here nor there. It's just because it's special to me because I'm a super fan, that's the value. It's not, yeah, my Bored Ape JPEG is worth $100,000. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, oh my gosh. The whole Bored Ape thing and the whole market tanking, and it's like, well, I hope you really, really like the illustration of that Bored Ape you got.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll print it or something like that, or get a gold necklace made. I don't know.
Yep.
But if you were in it for like a stock move or some kind of get rich thing, no. Buy art because you love it.
Yes.
Hopefully
exactly.
it appreciates.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's
ironically.
Yeah, exactly.
Ironically, there are art, like very well-known artists that do art sharing programs, and I think that's really cool. Like,
yes,
wow, I've got, I'm partial owner in a Julian Schnabel, piece
yes.
or whatever.
Oh, were you familiar with? Do you know Particle? Have you come across Particle? So they're doing something similar, but with NFTs. So essentially, they were taking. So the first thing they did was a Banksy. It was the Banksy with the guy throwing the Molotov cocktails, but it's flowers, and it's mostly white with this thing. But they basically took that. They bought the Banksy, digitized it, fractionalized the 10,000 squares basically, and then sold those. But those gave you ownership of the original piece of art. And the idea is they're building essentially a collection so that, to own a Banksy, you've got to be a multi-millionaire, right? But now for $500, if I'm a fan, yes, there's still an investment. You've still got to be a certain level of financial security, all that stuff. But I want to spend $500 to be partial owner of this Banksy, of this artist that I love, versus, well, I've got to spend $10 million to get this bloody thing, which is completely beyond what I can do. Like, that's, again, I think some of the fun of Web3 and some of the benefits of it. And going back to your point about, buy something because you love it, we're huge fans of Proof and everything they've done with that ecosystem. And their thing all along has been, yes, there's money to be made here, but that's not the reason to do this. It's about the art. It's about the cool things that we can do uniquely in this space. And if that's your guiding light, yeah, you may make some money, you may lose some money, but at least you'll have something that you like at the end of it.
Yeah, and we've had conversations with people who are doing fractional solar farms. So you could lease, X amount of kilowatts a month and, work off the grid, and anything you don't like, don't use, you can kind of resell it back to the grid or the municipalities. We've talked to people. Oh yeah, it's clever. Yeah, so taking the model that you and I know of NFT world and actually expounding on that. And there are others doing it with rare bottles of wine.
Yeah, yep, I've seen that. I've seen the rare wine. It's like, great, the ownership of this wine can be transferred with an NFT anywhere. You're not shipping it. You're not wrecking the danger of destroying this bottle. We were actually talking, really interesting conversation last year with a Web3 lawyer who was, he'd been down in a symposium in South Africa talking about using blockchain technology for government contracts because South Africa obviously famously massively corrupt system in so many ways, and heartbreaking for me because I spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe and South Africa there as a young man, and I love that part. I love that part of the world with a passion, and it's endemically corrupt. And there were, these, technologists coming in saying, we can solve a huge amount of this by putting government contracts on the blockchain, and here's how that would work, and you can then track this money comes in as taxes, and we're allocating it over here, and here's where it got spent under. And of course, a huge swathe of people saying, yes, that's fucking brilliant, let's do that. And then a whole lot of other people going, God, no, that's my livelihood you're messing with. I make my money from skimming off the top of these things. But so, no, the application of blockchain tech in way beyond what we know it as today, truly is the future. I think that is the exciting part of this,
Yeah, and Adam, you hit on another point that we like to bring up, and we want to talk about it more. I don't want to deviate you and I now, but the idea of if you understand the fundamental mechanics of Web3 and cryptography, you would say, wow. And that's usually the tipping point when you finally put enough hours in and you finally get it and you're like, oh my God, this actually could have the power. No, not actually. It does have the power to change humanity. To change society, to change the world. And you see it now in the United States. The SEC. You're not allowed to do this. You're allowed to do. It's not governed. It's not written into law. This is not a security. These are knee-jerk reactions so that they can stall and or dip the markets so they can participate, which is horrible. And they understand that through this technology, trust is inherent. If you go into that door, you are offering everything to be transparent. And that is something, to your point before, a lot of people don't want that. That is their livelihood.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Smoke and mirrors.
Yes. Oh, no, the idea... I mean, look, you bring it back around. We talked about it kind of as, the kind of Hollywood accounting system. I mean, the number of horror stories of just the levels of corruption that the studios operate on to screw the filmmakers out of residuals, out of participation, other things, the stuff that gets charged against shows that shouldn't be there. Several people that I know engaged in kind of multi-million dollar lawsuits with major studios to get what they're owed because they produce this thing that people love and they bloody well be paid for it. I mean, you look, Anyway, that's a whole other conversation, but yes.
Absolutely, yeah. We have some friends and music producers in Hollywood, and film directors and whatnot.
Yep.
And you're right, it's rife with that, and it's a shame. Now, talking tech, talking this, one of the topics that I don't care who you are, it's unavoidable. The idea of AI, right? So.
Yes.
If you talk to artists, designers, I remember when all this stuff I was months and months ago, on the beta programs for a lot of these things, and I was able to form some opinions, and I do have opinions on this, obviously, but and it's sometimes it's people are on the right or the left, or sometimes they're edging in the middle, but they don't know why, right?
Right.
How do you guys as an organization feel about AI, and how potentially would you incorporate it into your business?
Great questions, and I think you're totally right about like so many things. It's quite polarizing, right? So I think we know artists who say, "This is really interesting. I want to learn more about it. How can I incorporate?" You mentioned this kind of early on as we were talking. How do I incorporate this exciting new thing into what I do, right? And I think that's that experimental attitude in life. It is a bit like that. Yeah, no, I can do that, and then figure it out, right? Yes, it's how can I use this technology to enhance what I do, and hopefully not then get kind of consumed by it, because I think there is another group of artists, obviously, that are just, and understandably, very, very anxious about this thing taking over what they do. If I was a mid-tier concept artist at this stage, I would be quite anxious, and I'd be definitely in the camp of how do I incorporate this into what I do so that I'm staying ahead of this thing and still valuable, so that it's not an exec can kind of type something into a system and into a computer program and spit out an example of what I want to do, of what I have been traditionally producing. So I think we look at it, everything that we are dealing with, we're not AI focused at all at this phase. We're using it for fun promo images. We're using it for kind of fun engagement as opposed to trying to tell stories with it. At this stage, we've experimenting with ChatGPT a little bit, but for us again, we tend to approach that from the perspective of, all right, we've got an idea for a story and we're starting to do the kind of brainstorming, how does this work? We'll feed the idea into ChatGPT, because right now what that'll do will be to produce like the most obvious bog standard basic version of that story. So what we do is we plug in a ChatGPT, here's the basic version, great. Any idea that we've had that falls in that, we're going to throw out, because that's the simple version. So how do we tell the interesting version of that story? I still like, it's funny because I'll play with Midjourney and things to some degree, but if I'm looking for inspiration for an idea or an image or a deck that we're working from or some reference image, whatever, I don't like using AI to do that. I will still go and scroll through DeviantArt. I'll still go and look at these, existing images, because to me, that's what sparks my imagination. I don't necessarily, and for me, it's like casting. It's like, I don't always, if I'm casting for a live role or a voiceover, or whatever, I don't always know what I'm looking for, and then someone does it, and you're like, oh, that's perfect. And so to me, it's not replacing anything at this stage. It's enhancing our ability to be creative. And yeah, we're starting to explore. It's like within the storytelling aspects of what we've got. It's like, okay, well, can we incorporate some AI tech to help people develop their stories, even in particular places? Well, can we then take that and have them produce an image that's kind of featuring their character? Well, maybe, we're looking at how to kind of integrate some of that stuff, but to our mind, none of that is replacing, I have this idea about this thing, the story I want to tell, I'm going to write this story, and then we're going to talk to an artist and produce it in this way. We're not circumventing any of that thing. We're just hopefully, it comes back to the iterating, right? We're helping people iterate on their ideas using some of this tech before taking it this direction.
Yeah, all great points, Adam. And you're right. It is a tool, right? It's a tool. Mainly, it's like if you want original characters, you're not going to want to use Midjourney. I'm sorry. You can get some, push your mind into different corners of the universe. Yes. But ultimately, if you want something that hasn't been seen before, people don't understand. AI aggregates and groks
Exactly.
billions and billions of things that have already happened or have been made, right? So it's a great production tool. I've seen guys doing complete phenomenal storyboards, movie scripts and commercial storyboards with it, producing movies now with it. I use it for audio stuff because I do a weekly wrap-up, a Web3 wrap-up. That's not me talking.
Oh, wow.
It's machine. Yeah, I trained it.
Yep.
I trained an AI bot to understand my language, and it works, and you can adjust it over time. But to me, it's like artists are the first ones to get upset, but then they'll adopt it, they will break it, and then they will reinvent it. So I think the voice of the artists, particularly artists and designers and creatives in this world, the AI world, is very, very important, and we should all take notice and listen, because generally these are the men and women who are, the creative folks who are they wreck things.
Yes.
because they can,
Yes.
but they make something else out of it. So that's the idea of being an artist, right? Or
Yes.
one of them.
Yes.
So yeah. As Adam, as we're wrapping up a little bit, one, I want to know, you guys going to be at Comic-Con or LA Comic-Con this year?
Yes.
Or?
We absolutely will be. So we'll have I won't be, unfortunately. I'll still be down in Panama when that happens. But my partners, Evan Matthews and Ricky Ricavino, the two partners will be there. And then some of our other the people, the kind of fantastic people that we work with are going to be around as well. So no, we'll be there in force talking to people. I'm actually sad. I was meant to be back in LA for a show, and then stuff happened that stopped me from coming back as quickly as I wanted. So I was actually very hopeful that I would make it this year. But yes, I miss it. It's wonderful.
It's the first time I went, it was a little overwhelming, but I'll definitely be doing it this year, making plans
good.
for the New York one.
Nice.
It's always a scene. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I have
Interesting
to
that at San Diego this year that the studios are not going to be there in force in the same way. So hopefully that means it'll actually be less kind of movie centric and a little more comic centric. It'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be really, because that's, I like all the movies, don't get me wrong.
Of course.
And it's cool that they have the actors come and, sign autographs and do, talks. But it's the little obscure weirdo comic dudes who are like selling original art and, a bunch of comics with it and maybe an NFT. Like, that's cool. Like, I want to see the new stuff that's bubbling up.
Exactly. No, that's what I found the last couple of times. We did LA a couple of years ago, and I mean, we'll probably be doing LA again this year as well. But that was what I found myself doing. It's like I would just be trolling Artist Alley and the little independent presses and chatting with these people and getting numbers. And it's actually, there's a Comic-Con coming up in Panama, and I'm going to be doing the same thing there. It'll be like, great. I want to go, and don't care about anything else that's going on. I want to go chat with local artists and hopefully find some really cool, new, unknown people that we can put to work, frankly.
That's awesome if it's happening in Panama. Yeah, you get like such a different lens on the whole thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it definitely helps. I mean, right now the app is English language only, but obviously we're very focused on how do we expand South American market, Korean, Japan, like those three markets we badly want to get into. And so they're starting to kind of branch out into those communities would be great.
Yeah, and different beasts, right? Different set of rules.
Different set of rules, different storytelling. I mean, it was funny. I don't know have you seen Attack on Titan? Have you watched Attack on Titan? Do you know Attack on Titan, the anime series?
No, I don't know that one. No.
It is. It's my son turned me on to it. It's it's a 20-book manga or something. Like it's one of those insane things. It is legitimately. It's some of the best storytelling I have ever seen. It is spectacular, and it's consistently excellent in the way that Breaking Bad is just consistently excellent. Like it's crazy in a way that Game of Thrones, the best of Game of Thrones, still to me is some of the best television ever produced.
Season one,
one of the greatest seasons of TV ever produced. The pilot, one of the greatest pilots ever produced. Like, and then there are these pieces in there that are just spectacular, and then it totally jumps the shark if you don't totally like. But Attack on Titan, consistently spectacular. But the way they tell the stories is just a different ethos than the kind of US, Eurocentric approach to things. And it is, like, I keep having these conversations with my partners as we're looking at them, like, how do we do that? Like, what? I don't even know how to begin to break that down. It's just different, and I love it. And so exactly, like, that's the hope is, and then hopefully we'll find some interesting, we're working with a team out of Nigeria, with a publisher in Nigeria and a bunch of artists out there, and they're telling some really interesting. We're starting to kind of get some of their stuff ready for the app as well, of like their local mythologies or sci-fi spins on their local. And I don't know. I mean, my wife is Nigerian Panamanian mix. I don't know any of this stuff, but it's fascinating, and it's a whole other world. It's a whole other approach to life. It's it's just, so that's hugely exciting basically. So I'm hoping we'll be finding some of the same stuff down here, and different mythologies, different takes, different ideas outside of the kind of Eurocentric stuff.
And that mythology that's been maybe hidden for many years or generations, now you get access to that. To me, that's a gold mine.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's exactly,
Yeah.
you know.
Awesome. So, as we wrap up a little bit, this has been a fantastic
I've
conversation,
been
Adam.
so appreciative. I'm sorry, we go. I hope this is not way over time. I've
No, no,
really
it's
enjoyed the
totally
conversation.
it's all good, and this happens quite often,
Oh,
and
good.
it's really good when it does.
Well, hopefully your listeners haven't got sick of the voice yet. So yeah, that'll be good.
No, no, my voice, maybe my voice, not yours. What does Macroverse, sorry, have in store for us? What are you guys working on? Anything you want to tease out?
Yes. Oh yeah. So we're gearing up for our first big comics drop of the kind of unique Web3 comics and with this interactive style. So that's going to be a draft of 5 series. We're still playing with like cost and numbers specifically, but we're thinking there'll be kind of 1,000 of each series basically coming out. There'll be 5 different collectability kind of rarity tiers within each one. Lots of great art, lots of great additions that we're putting inside these various things. Kind of really, really want to have some fun with that. So we're kind of in the last phase with the developers of like kicking the tires, test minting, what's not working. There's like 3 things left we've got to fix until we're kind of ready to go. And then once we've got like the tech works, then we'll be 4 weeks out from launch basically. But we want to make sure that works so that the experience is seamless for the people coming in. We're working with the Wanderers community directly right now, so that's this kind of community-based storytelling we've been doing. So we're in production on a whole lot of short little 2-page comics, and then we have like a longer form series coming out. They've got a game that they're working on as well, so like their whole ecosystem is super cool. It's this kind of R-rated Star Wars vibe, fun, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but really interesting. The lore is really deep to kind of counterbalance that. So like having a ton of fun with them, and I think that project is huge. And I think again, you talk about projects that are kind of go way beyond the JPEG, as it were. Like they are up to so much great stuff, which is awesome. And then we have we've got a number of kind of new media projects that we're working with. So we're in the process of adapting a comic series called Remind, and we're doing kind of an audio animated hybrid of that, which is super exciting. We just started casting on that, so that's going to be fun. And then working with, I can't say what yet, but we're working with a couple of game projects, developing out the kind of lore and the story kind of verse around them. So we've done that a couple of times as well now. There's been a cool project, they're building a game out, but they don't quite know how to tie all the different threads together. And so we've come in and, yeah, great. How do we make that coordinated? How do we bring these elements in? How do we create the kind of Bible for this world so that then you're building on a rock solid foundation? And then how do you expand that out? So we've got a couple of those things. But yeah, between the launch for us and the Wanderers, that's taking up a lot of our kind of focus at the moment. 4 or 5 other things coming down the road.
Yeah, I see. When I look at a macroverse kind of platform and what you guys are doing, and I think to myself, oh my God, it is so much production, it's so much thinking, it's so
Right.
much, yeah. But as long as you got the pawns in place and the people in place, you
That's
can.
the thing, and that's very much like I mean, Eben and I have done a ton. Ricky comes from gaming, and he's produced a ton, like multiple 100 million plus downloads of games. Like he's got that sort of thing. So as we're getting more into the gaming world as well, like he's spearheading that. Eben and I have done so much animation over the years. We know what those pipelines, we know what it takes, we know, and obviously coming from live action, it's like, oh yeah, we know you get good at putting the team together. How do you do this? What do you do? What do you need? We're still skinny, we're still a small operation, like we're lean and mean as well. Lean and not mean, lean and nice, but yes, fast moving and able to kind of adapt quickly and roll with it. But it's exciting, it's fun. But I think that's where the production, like you say, the production background comes in, because you kind of know what you're getting into with any one of these projects, which helps.
Absolutely. Okay, good. So do you guys have any Twitter spaces coming up? Our listeners might want to kind of bookmark or put on the calendar?
We do a weekly, actually Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We do a weekly kind of storytelling. It's actually mostly through we're on our Discord, but it's through. Oh my goodness me, I'm now forgetting it. But it's live on YouTube. It goes out everywhere, basically. Twitter Spaces, YouTube, Discord, whatever. So that's kind of storytelling, catch up, talking about what we're doing. So that's our Discord is discord.gg/Macroverse is our Discord channel, and then Twitter is just Macroverse, and Instagram is macroverse.hq. Macroverse HQ. I'm sorry. Yeah. So just come hit us up on those. We're very available, always around. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, and for our listeners and viewers, check them out. Macroverse.
Please do.
Fun stuff. If you're even slightly into the comics and the movies world, again, you guys are kind of hitting the gas a little harder with the comics.
Definitely.
For various reasons that we just got into. But I would imagine some of the, this fandom and fan-based community, building we'll start to see it happen more with music and perhaps movies, obviously.
Very much. I mean, the goal is we're starting with comics because we love them, and the kind of barrier to entry is limited. It's low, rather. We're very much like, the goal is to be a media company. We want to be entertainment. We want to be films, television, animation. Music is huge. I mean, we're in some conversations with some musicians at the moment as well, which is kind of fun. And like, how do we bring all these things together to make it this kind of cohesive fan experience? That's the holy grail. That's what we're going for.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing your company, your vision, and a little bit of yourself with us. We really appreciate it, and I'd love to get more Macroverse kids on the podcast, some of your partners,
yes,
and yourself again as well, and keep the story going, and kind of, this is evolving. It's not done tomorrow.
It's not a static, and nothing in this industry is static, right? Yeah,
nothing.
Great.
And not only that, it just moves exponentially faster than it did.
Yes.
So that could be a whole other podcast for us. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and check them out, everyone. It's good stuff.
Thank you so much, Rich. Really appreciate it. Hope people enjoyed it.